eventually achieved through challenge, sacrifice, and determination. George Washington fought for liberty as Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army during the American Revolution, and once again as first President of the United States, as his country struggled for an identity. As he helped to lay the foundations for some of American government, he made sure we would not forget that liberty was the cornerstone for this country, by saying liberty itself will find in such government, properly adjusted and distributed, its surest guardian. Thomas Jefferson fought for liberty through his words, called the Declaration of Independence, to define a nation. While Jefferson's views of government were different from many of the other founding fathers, same. Other founding fathers, he worked to secure liberty for Americans. Even as third president of the United States, and forever affect the course of American history, Jefferson worked for Americans. But like Washington, he grew weary of the nation's ability to keep the idea of liberty alive. Once the novelty of independence wore off, would we remember the sacrifices made for our comfort? Jefferson warned that, yes, we did create a near-perfect republic, but will they keep it? Or will they, in the enjoyment of plenty, lose the memory of freedom? Material abundance without character is the path of destruction. In Abraham Lincoln's day, 87 years after declaring our independence, the idea of liberty was being taken for granted. Abraham Lincoln reminded us of this right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, striving to keep a nation together during the American Civil War. And by issuing an Emancipation Proclamation, he drew this nation one step closer toward a better and brighter future for later generations. Abraham Lincoln believed in the idea of liberty so much, he went so far as to say, "I have never had a feeling politically that did not spring from the Declaration of Independence, that all should be given an equal chance." He said, "This is a sentiment embodied in the Declaration of Independence, and I'd rather be assassinated on this spot than surrender it." At the turn of the century, once again, the ideas of liberty were for granted. Already the ideas and warnings given to us by our founding fathers were being discarded for a new mentality. And why not? It was the beginning of a new century where anything was possible and the people felt they were invincible. Theodore Roosevelt reminded us again as he saw this nation's potential in a role of leadership, and by securing economic freedom for everyone by breaking up the big businesses and monopolies that had taken over the country at the time. But he also reminded us of liberty through the simple concept of tracts of land, a place to come and enjoy the freedom of this country. Roosevelt, conservation, he wrote and spoke often on the subject, one of which he said, "I recognize the right of this generation to use and develop resources of this land, the right to waste them or rob with wasteful use the later generations that come after us." Since the beginning of that was never expected to make it, a country often referred to as the Great Experiment, a country founded upon religion, but also a country that would defy the odds nevertheless, to stand up and hold its own against the nations that had come before it. And all because of men and women who came before us to show us what liberty was all about. People like these four presidents up here. And yes, they did come beliefs from different geographical locations and even different periods in history. But they had one thing in common, a love for their country and an understanding of the importance of liberty to this country. Now I'd like to close this talk tonight with one last quote. It is a quote that is a favorite of mine and a quote that comes from a movie actually. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. And in that movie is a quote on liberty that I'd like to share with you tonight. And it goes like this: "Liberty is too precious a thing to be buried in books. Man should hold it out in front of them every single day of their lives and say, 'I am free to think and to speak. My ancestors couldn't, but I can, and my children will.'" Ladies and gentlemen, as we proceed through the decade of a still brand new century, I wonder if we have not started to take liberty for granted once again. And I encourage each and every one of you, stop and ask yourselves, what does liberty mean to me?
Ladies and gentlemen, please stand as you are able and join this national anthem.
Ladies and gentlemen of the audience, I invite the gallant military personnel, past and present, that have been displaying the flag to begin folding it.
While we're waiting on them to fold the flag, it got really chilly all of a sudden when the sun went down here, so bring a jacket. I have some tips for you on where to sit and what to do. Y'all keep watching though, it's gonna get really, really cool.
Now, for most of these men and women, this is the only public recognition they will ever receive for their willingness to serve. Let's show them how we feel about them with a round of heartfelt applause. This concludes our evening lighting ceremony. Thank you all for coming and drive safe.
That was super fast 5 minutes. It said it was going to take 15 minutes.